What is direct experience? After awakening, we have access to consciousness, to the direct experience of consciousness, unbound by thought objects. Whether this is overtly obvious or not, we have the ability to just reside in that pure knowingness, or that pure sense of being. And most importantly, there's been a shift or a transition in identity where we recognize that what we took to be our identity previously was but a shadow of our true identity, at least as far as consciousness is concerned. So there's a far more expanded, free, fluid experience of not just identity, but the world, reality, life. And the identity itself, the fluidity of identity, is seamless with reality for the most part. Some of this depends on the depth of awakening. So from here, we have this ability to come into direct experience with consciousness itself, or with being itself. This is the recognition of pure being, the ability to rest in pure being. And often, the practitioner will do this for a good amount of time after awakening. Spend days, weeks, months doing this for an hour a day or 2 hours a day or sometimes more. Because it's so enjoyable, it's so neutral, it's so accessible. We finally feel free of the constantly dividing experience of being in the mind. Now, as this naturally evolves, we will start to have direct experience of the sense world, which can be quite surprising what that actually is. Because when we're not filtering our experience through conscious perceptual filters, the experience itself is imperceptibly light, incredibly freeing, very intimate, quite paradoxical. In one sense, it's infinitely expansive, but in another sense, it's just this right here. Intimacy beyond intimacy. So this is the paradoxical world of thusness or suchness. Now, for a while, this ability to experience directly is a produced experience, meaning we have to focus, remind ourselves, tune in, or do some inquiry to experience sound in a non-dualistic way, or sensation in a non-dualistic way, or the visual experience in a non-dualistic way. But as we practice, this ability becomes much more spontaneous, much more readily available. Now, it's important, even at this stage, or perhaps more importantly at this stage, that we don't use direct experience to avoid something uncomfortable. This is a trap that can occur after awakening because it's so easy to dissolve experience by just focusing attention on it or moving attention deeply into a singular experience. The problem with this is the identity structures that are at play behind the scenes, forming these views of direct experience and these views of realization itself, of awareness itself, are still intact. So that identity structure, even though it's very thin, hard to see, easy to overlook, is still there. So sometimes we have to come back from the direct experience, or the tendency to dissolve into direct experience, to investigate any remaining fixations, identity structures, selfing mechanisms. With that said, it's usually a good practice to continue to clarify what direct experience actually is. It's an experience that's so clear, so deep, so profound, so engulfing that there's no explanation or description for it. Indeed, there's no tendency, desire, or need to form a description or an explanation or a paradigm of it. So it becomes very simple, but also, because it's so simple, easy to overlook some residue of attention overlying or a residue of awareness apart from. So I think one important thing to keep in mind about this is when we practice in this way, when we recognize that in hearing, there is only the heard. There's just sound hearing, that we let the sound be the teacher. We let the hearing be the teacher. It's teaching us the language of directness, of immediacy, of the paradoxical nature of sound and silence. We simultaneously hear the hearing and hear the silence that's also the hearing. So this experience itself is the teacher. It teaches us how not to run back into the mind, into descriptions, into judgments, into views, into frames of reference. When hearing, there's only the heard. When moving, there's only movement. When seeing, there's only the seen. This is direct experience, actual experience, immediate, zero distance experience.